I asked to be demoted at work. Here's what happened. The stack of unopened emails blurred in front of me. Each one, a tiny demand, a little fire to put out, a gentle nudge closer to the edge. I used to thrive on this. Used to love the constant problem solving, the feeling of control, the satisfaction of delivering a project on time and under budget. Now, it felt like drowning. I was Sarah, project manager extraordinaire, or at least, that's what my performance reviews said. For the last 5 years, I'd been the go-to person for the trickiest projects at StellarTech, a mid-sized software company nestled in the tech-saturated landscape of Austin. I pulled off miracles, wrangled impossible deadlines, and even managed to keep a smile plastered on my face while doing it. But the smile was cracking. The deadlines were getting tighter, the resources scarcer, and the demands were relentless. Greg, my direct supervisor, wasn't a bad guy, not really. He was just ambitious and increasingly pressured by Mr. Thompson, the CEO, a man whose only visible emotion was a fervent desire to see the stock price rise. Greg, in turn, was pressuring us. Me. "Just a little more, Sarah," he'd say, his voice laced with a desperate kind of encouragement. "Just get us through this quarter and things will ease up." But things never eased up. They just got worse. More projects, shorter timelines, the constant refrain of do more with less. I was working late nights, skipping lunch breaks, and even dreaming about Gantt charts. My apartment, once a haven, had become an extension of the office, filled with takeout containers and the glow of my laptop screen. The final straw was Project Phoenix, a ridiculously ambitious undertaking to overhaul the company's flagship product, riddled with scope creep from the very beginning. The initial timeline was laughably unrealistic, and when I raised concerns, Greg had brushed them aside. "Thompson wants it done by Q3, he'd said, his face tight. "Make it happen." So I tried. I pushed my team, I sacrificed my weekends, I practically lived on caffeine and sheer willpower. But even I had my limits. Developers were burning out, designers were threatening to quit, and clients were starting to complain about missed deadlines. The project was a train wreck waiting to happen, and I was the conductor, powerless to stop it. One evening, after a particularly brutal conference call with a furious client, I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, tears welling up in my eyes. I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. I knew I needed to make a change. Talking to Brenda, a senior project manager who had been with the company for over a decade, offered a sliver of clarity. Brenda had seen it all. "They'll bleed you dry if you let them, Sarah," she'd said, her voice low and pragmatic. "You have to protect yourself." Her words resonated. I realized I was sacrificing my health, my sanity, and my life for a company that wouldn't think twice about replacing me if I dropped dead. The next day, during my quarterly performance review with Greg, I dropped a bomb. "I want to be demoted," I said, the words sounding strange even to my own ears. Greg stared at me, his mouth agape. "Demoted? What are you talking about, Sarah? You're one of our best project managers." "I'm also burned out," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I can't keep up this pace. I need something less demanding, something that allows me to use my skills without sacrificing my sanity." I explained my reasoning: the unsustainable workload, the lack of support, the unrealistic expectations. I suggested a role in technical writing, where I could leverage my project management experience to create clear and concise documentation. Greg listened, his expression shifting from shock to something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it relief? Opportunity? I need to think about this, Sarah," he said finally, his brow furrowed. "This is unexpected." He told me he'd talk to HR and get back to me. I left his office feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. I'd finally taken control of my life, but I also knew I'd just thrown a wrench into the carefully constructed machinery of StellarTech. The call came 2 days later. My demotion had been approved. I was to transition to the technical writing department within 2 weeks, with a corresponding decrease in salary and responsibilities. The HR meeting was perfunctory. The HR rep, a young woman named Emily, asked me if I was being coerced or felt pressured into the decision. I assured her I was making it of my own free will. I sensed, however, that she didn't quite believe me. As I was leaving, I saw Greg talking to Kevin, a younger project manager who had joined the company about a year ago. Kevin was ambitious, eager to prove himself, and, in my opinion, woefully inexperienced. I caught a glimpse of Greg's face, a look of calculating satisfaction, and a chill ran down my spine. The pieces started to fall into place. Greg wasn't just accepting my demotion, he was actively exploiting it. He saw it as an opportunity to elevate Kevin, to offload my responsibilities onto someone younger, cheaper, and more willing to bend to his will. As I packed up my office, clearing out the piles of documents and sticky notes that had accumulated over the years, Brenda stopped by. "Be careful, Sarah," she said, her voice low. "They'll try to make you the scapegoat if things go south. Document everything, CYA. Cover your assets." Her warning was like a splash of cold water. I realized I couldn't just walk away and expect everything to be fine. Greg and Kevin would undoubtedly try to pin any failures on me, claiming I had deliberately sabotaged the projects during the transition. I took Brenda's advice to heart. I started meticulously documenting every interaction, every email, every meeting. I kept a detailed log of my activities, noting any concerns I raised, any potential pitfalls I identified. I wasn't going to let them use me as a punching bag. My first few weeks in the technical writing department were surreal. The pace was slower, the stress levels lower, and the atmosphere significantly less toxic. My new colleagues were friendly and welcoming, and I found a surprising amount of satisfaction in crafting clear and concise documentation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it did. It started subtly. Greg would occasionally call me, asking for my input on some lingering issue with Project Phoenix. "Just a quick question, Sarah," he'd say, his voice oozing false sincerity. "You know the project so well, I was hoping you could offer some guidance." I knew what he was doing. He was trying to get me to fix Kevin's mistakes without giving me any credit, exploiting my institutional knowledge while simultaneously undermining my authority. I played along, but I was careful. I offered vague suggestions, pointed out potential problems without providing concrete solutions, and always made sure to frame my advice as just an idea. I wanted to see them squirm. I wanted to watch their carefully constructed plans crumble. And crumble they did. Project Phoenix started to unravel. Deadlines were missed, bugs were discovered, and clients were growing increasingly frustrated. Kevin, overwhelmed and out of his depth, started making rash decisions, further exacerbating the problems. Greg, desperate to salvage the situation, became increasingly frantic. He started micromanaging Kevin, second-guessing his decisions, and generally making his life miserable. The team morale plummeted. Developers started calling in sick, designers threatened to walk out, and even the usually unflappable Brenda started looking stressed. One afternoon, Greg cornered me in the break room. "Sarah, I need your help," he said, his voice tight with desperation. "Phoenix is a disaster. Thompson is breathing down my neck, and Kevin is useless." He begged me to come back to the project, to use my expertise to fix the mess. He promised me a promotion, a raise, anything I wanted. I smiled sweetly. "I'm sorry, Greg," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm really happy in technical writing. Besides, I'm sure Kevin can handle it. He's so ambitious, so eager to prove himself." I watched his face contort with rage and frustration. It was glorious. The inevitable finally happened. Project Phoenix imploded. A critical bug was discovered just days before the launch, causing the entire system to crash. Clients were furious, investors were panicking, and Mr. Thompson was reportedly apoplectic. The blame game began immediately. Greg, desperate to save his own skin, tried to pin the entire fiasco on Kevin, claiming he was incompetent and negligent. Kevin, in turn, pointed his finger at me, alleging that I had deliberately sabotaged the project during the transition. Mr. Thompson, predictably, demanded a scapegoat. He called a meeting with Greg, Kevin, and me, his face grim. "I want answers," he barked, his eyes scanning the room. "Who was responsible for this disaster?" Greg and Kevin immediately started throwing each other under the bus, each trying to deflect blame and save their own careers. It was my turn. I took a deep breath and reached into my bag. "I believe I can shed some light on this situation," I said, my voice calm and steady. I pulled out my meticulously documented log, a comprehensive record of every interaction, every email, every meeting related to Project Phoenix. I presented it to Mr. G. Thompson, explaining how I had raised concerns about the project's feasibility from the very beginning, how Greg had dismissed my warnings, and how Kevin had made a series of disastrous decisions that ultimately led to the project's failure. I showed them the emails where Greg had tried to exploit my knowledge without giving me credit, the meeting notes where I had identified potential pitfalls that were subsequently ignored, and the records of Kevin's increasingly erratic behavior. The evidence was irrefutable. Greg and Kevin were speechless, their faces drained of color. Mr. Thompson read through the documentation, his expression hardening with each page. When he finished, he looked at Greg and Kevin, his eyes blazing with fury. "You two are a disgrace," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You prioritized your own ambitions over the good of the company. You lied, you manipulated, and you ultimately destroyed a critical project. The details of what happened to Greg and Kevin after that meeting are a little hazy. I heard rumors of formal reprimands, demotions, and even whispers of termination. I didn't particularly care. I had cleared my name and exposed their incompetence. That was enough." The aftermath of the Project Phoenix disaster was chaotic. The company underwent a period of soul-searching, and some much-needed changes were implemented. Deadlines were adjusted, resources were reallocated, and a greater emphasis was placed on employee well-being. As for me, I remained in the technical writing department, content with my reduced stress levels and improved work-life balance. My new colleagues treated me with respect, and I found a quiet satisfaction in using my skills to improve the company's documentation. Occasionally, I would overhear conversations about Greg and Kevin's struggles to regain their former positions. Their failures became a constant source of quiet amusement for me. And sometimes, I would subtly leverage my technical writing skills to undermine their future projects, ensuring they never quite managed to climb back up the corporate ladder. For example, I was tasked with rewriting the company's internal project management guidelines. I made sure to include detailed case studies highlighting the pitfalls of unrealistic deadlines, the importance of clear communication, and the dangers of prioritizing ambition over competence. The case studies, of course, were thinly veiled accounts of Greg and Kevin's disastrous handling of Project Phoenix. The new guidelines were widely circulated throughout the company, serving as a constant reminder of their failures. Every time someone quoted the guidelines in a meeting, I would smile inwardly, knowing that I was subtly shaping the company's culture and ensuring that Greg and Kevin would never forget their comeuppance. I didn't actively seek revenge, but I didn't exactly discourage it either. I had learned a valuable lesson sometimes. The best way to win is to simply step aside and let your enemies defeat themselves. The memory of Project Phoenix and the subsequent downfall of Greg and Kevin served as a constant reminder that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is the quiet kind, the kind that is served cold and leaves a lasting impact. And the icing on the cake? The respect of my colleagues and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, in my own way. My choice to be demoted might have looked like a weakness, but it was the smartest thing I ever did.